I'm CJ Peterson, and welcome to The Journey is Real. We talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. Today, my guest is Marc Johnston, and we titled his podcast, ICU Marriages, Solving Impossible Problems. Thank you for coming on today, Marc.
My pleasure being here. Thanks for having me, CJ.
This is kind of a common theme right now, especially with all of the COVID lock-ins and people getting stuck and being sequestered for 2 weeks if somebody in the house has COVID and stuff. How has this affected your current clientele? Has it gotten worse or?
No, absolutely. I hate to say this, but the pandemic, it hasn't been bad for our business. We were already online beforehand, and so it was just another day. And then just working with relationships, anytime that stress is increasing, we're more likely to have more relationship problems. And if I'm putting myself out there as someone who solves impossible relationship problems, we're certainly going to, we have been getting a lot more business from all this. Absolutely.
Well, you and your partner Heather are kind of like an EMS team for marriages. Can you kind of please share with those who are listening what that looks like and what that means?
Yeah, so basically we've created a niche in the market. Is we are helping individuals piece back their marriage by themselves. Like a lot of times the people that we are talking to, their partner either doesn't want to talk to a professional, or perhaps they might be starting to head out the door. Maybe they've already filed divorce papers already. And we're helping the other person who's leaning in and say, hey, is there anything that I can do to fix this at all? Admittedly, a lot of these scenarios are very difficult to solve, but my feeling, my opinion is there's always steps that you can do to improve it. Always, there's always something that you can do to make a situation better.
Well, if nothing else, it'll help that person, just even in their own personal life, because obviously there's something in there that's glitching and they need to figure out what it is. So if nothing else, you're helping that person in particular, if not the entire marriage.
Oh, absolutely. If you look into the statistics, it's something like for the first time marriage, the average divorce rate is about 40%, but it jumps up to something like 60, forgetting the specific numbers. It's like 65, 67% for the second marriage, 73, 75% for third and subsequent marriage.
Good heavens.
And it's exactly what you said there, CJ, is if you're not really looking at what you're doing and you're just saying, oh, it's the other person, I'm just going to divorce them, I'm going to find a new relationship, that one will work. Well, you see with the statistics, that's not really a good solution.
Yeah. It's like my husband and I currently, both of us were married before, but on the interim, we both got a lot of counseling because of situations that we were in. And so when you come together in a healthy relationship, it makes everything healthier and stronger for the next time, and you have a greater chance of success.
Exactly. So I'm just going to point, you're in a second marriage, the statistics are not working for you, but and here's the thing, the statistics don't work for me. I got married young. Statistics are not kind to that. I didn't, there's a bunch of factors that should say that I should have a higher rate of divorce, but just like you went and got a bunch of help. Throughout my marriage, I've been very conscious about how I, handle my own relationship with my wife, Jen. And, even if the statistics are working against you, there's things that you can do. And that's where I sit with a lot of my clients, is even though this is a really tricky situation, and the statistics might be against you on this working out, here's the steps that you can take to make this into a better scenario.
So how did this become a passion to you? Because you mentioned that your wife is Jen, but if I remember correctly, your partner is Heather.
Yeah, so my business partner is Heather Choate. Yeah, I'm married to Jen. Jen and I have been married for about 16 years. When we were first married, we were friends with Heather and her husband, Ben. And, we went our separate ways. We didn't talk for about 10 years. And we ended up randomly, Heather was really getting into a lot of self-help. She has this inspiring story of going through stage 4 breast cancer while pregnant and deciding to keep the pregnancy and deal with that. And so she really turned her life around and was like, okay, I'm going to be this person that really understands how to tackle big problems. And so I kept seeing her out there. I was like, Heather, let's do something together. And we started our business. But like for me, relationships have just always been really important. I came from a really big family. There's 8 kids, eight,
Wow.
8 siblings altogether. And I saw, I was just getting married myself. I think I had been married to my wife for like a year or two. And I started seeing problems with some of my siblings and some divorces there. I started seeing even divorces among peers and friends, even at that young age. And I was like, I was studying psychology at the time, and I was like, well, I really love my wife.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do here? Like, here's this opportunity for me to learn something practical. And so, I really
And
focused a lot of my studies.
you're doing it before, you have to,
Yeah.
if you're being proactive as opposed to reactive.
Well, at the time, I was like thinking to myself, I have no idea how to approach this and prevent these sort of problems at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, so I'll be honest, like I took a pre-marriage class with my wife, and I look back on that, and it was kind of a garbage class. It didn't really do much for me. It didn't really prepare me for all the ups and downs of a long-term committed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, what do I need for that? And so I started doing a lot of studying on the side. I took, the classes where I could, but even there, like, there's not a lot of, even when you're going for like a psychology degree, there's not a lot built into a lot of the programs specifically for this. So it was really important for me to maintain the relationship that was important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always been a people watcher. I was a counselor for about 5 years, and then I was a residential catastrophe adjuster. And people like, so does that mean you were a marriage counselor? Well, no, I was actually a residential catastrophe adjuster. But your guys are kind of a residential catastrophe adjuster. You guys kind of go in there and have to adjust, what's going on and help them figure out how to make it stronger and better and, the home better.
Exactly. I would agree with you. Like, it's a lot of these scenarios, they could very easily be called catastrophes. And a lot of the times it's the result of like years worth of patterns just kind of building up in the background until it all just kind of spills out all of a sudden, and we have this catastrophe like event, and now they're ready to leave the marriage.
Yeah, and it's like I always feel like if you had taken, it's kind of like the stitch in time saves 9 theory. If they had taken care of some stuff like way back when, these wouldn't be quite so big. If they realized patterns when I was being a counselor, we had to basically get ourselves to a healthy point before we could counsel other people. And so we learned what are those patterns. And what we would do is we would take 3 lines and put it on a piece of paper, and we'd have them tell us the earliest memories all the way through the current. And you could see patterns all the way through there and figure out what they are and how to adjust them.
Yeah, I really like the concept of patterns and how they play out in relationships. I frequently bring the topic up in my sessions. It's things that I recognize within my own marriage. Like, I'm a big believer in the people who are giving help need to be getting help as well. Like, so I'm not ashamed to say, like, my wife and I, we have a life coach right now, and like one of the topics that we're discussing is the patterns that exist in our own marriage. And as I've been discussing that with this person, I'm looking back years and how these patterns have played out in my relationships and with my wife, but with other people as well. And it's fascinating.
Well, everybody has them. Everybody's got patterns, but most people are afraid to admit them, or, it's the other person, it's not me. And it's like, no, everybody's got one, but social media anymore says, no, you got to put this mask on that everything is good, everything is great, you're cool, you're fine, and everything is happy-go-lucky, rainbows and unicorns. And that's not accurate. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I started the Journey is Real, is I wanted to let people know that, you're not alone in what you're doing.
Do you mind if I share like my own, like my own pattern with my wife?
Sure.
I don't mind being like completely transparent with on things like this or in with my clients. So like, here's the thing. I spend a lot of my day helping people.
Mhm.
And so I focus in on other people's problems. And I see this come out in my relationship with my wife. And I go and I'll see my wife, she's stressed or something. And I go and I rescue her, essentially. A lot of times what ends up happening is I kind of push down my own needs or my own
Mhm.
feelings because I don't want to add any extra stress to my wife. I don't want to indicate areas where she's not good enough. And so now when I feel like I do need to bring up feedback, there's all this tension around it. But here's the thing. I'm being very transparent about this, but it's good to be aware of this pattern because
Mhm.
my wife and I catch ourselves in this. And we're like, okay, we know that this is a sensitive area. We know that I recognize hey, it's difficult for me to give feedback to my wife because this is
Mhm.
like a relationship where I keep feeling like it's better for me to be there, be that rock, be strong for her. And my wife recognizes, hey, like I might need to step out of her part of the pattern, being a little bit more okay with feedback, trying to encourage me to speak up. And that's the beauty of this is like I can be transparent about it. We're aware of it. We know where our sensitive spots are. So when it pops up, we can step out of that pattern a little bit
Mhm.
easier.
Well, there's those, and there's patterns, and then there's also triggers,
Mhm.
triggers from your past that you don't even might not even know are there. And it's like my husband and I have fought in 10 years maybe twice, and both of those were because we were both triggered and we didn't know it until it had already gone up. And so it's like if you're aware of your person's past and where those triggers are, and if you're aware of how they normally are, and what is their normal baseline, and when something suddenly they jumped up, it's like you need to kind of put on a little bit of a detective hat and go, okay, this isn't me. What's triggered this? How can we fix this and stop it from escalating up too high? And so it's like when you do that, and when you know like their love language, and you kind of feed into that love language, it kind of calms them down a little bit, and you realize, okay, when everything's calmed down, what can I do to not have that happen again? And my husband and I have this theory of, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. Can you do this instead? So that gives that partner another way of handling it instead of just going, I don't know. You
And it
kind of
sounds
got
like
to
you and
help
your
each
husband
other
are.
through it.
Oh yeah, and that's something that I see quite frequently as the problem is people don't recognize. Okay, your partner, your husband, your wife, your significant other. There's going to be areas that they are more sensitive in.
Mhm.
And this is always how I describe it is like they're more sensitive. This is an area that they need support in. You're going to just need to be mindful. This is not likely to be something that's just going to go away from a few sessions.
Mhm.
And coming to some acceptance where we are sensitive, where we need some extra support, communication around those things, I think can often solve a lot of the tension around those scenarios.
Mhm. And don't be afraid to step away and come back like 20 minutes later when you've cooled down, so you don't say something that you'll regret.
Yeah,
That causes
absolutely.
issues too. So, do you have any kind of quick tip pointers for those who are listening? Besides the
Like
obvious of find help if you need it, before you need it, preferably.
it all kind of depends on what you're looking for, what you're aiming for. I could go into, I like to dip in a lot of different theories. I could talk about Carl Rogers and his conditions for change. I think that's something that comes up frequently. Or I like Cartman's drama triangle for stepping out of tension and drama. Or I like to talk about Gottman and Four Horsemen of Divorce. But if I had to have like just a general tip,
Mhm.
something that is almost universally good in most relationships is to learn to be okay with giving and receiving feedback.
Mhm.
Very rarely is that a completely comfortable skill in a marriage, and very rarely is focusing on that not going to provide some good results. I will always say that a healthy relationship is one that can make adjustments, can be a bit flexible, can say, hey, if there's problems going on, let's have some feedback and let's talk about what we can do. And that's almost always universally like a good direction for relationships going.
That and it's okay to not be okay. You know, you don't have to be 100% of the time, especially with you know, your other half. They're your helpmeet. They're there to help you through whatever it is. You got to let them know though, because if you let it stack up inside of you, it's kind of like putting, you know, those pebbles in a cup of water, and one of these little itty bitty pebbles may make it overflow someday, and they don't even know where it came from.
I like the way, you know, a mentor of mine put it, you know, in talking about feedback. He put it in terms of questions like, do you trust your partner in, you know, not just like provide, you know, being vulnerable with them, but do you trust them to have their own emotions based off of your feedback? So like a lot of times we don't give feedback because we perceive our partner might get upset, they might be sad, they might feel anxious. And the question goes then, like, do you trust them in being okay with those emotions? And I don't know, that really got me thinking. I was like, oh, you know, in describing like my pattern with my wife, I was like, oh, maybe I don't always trust my wife with being okay with being a little bit sad if I give her some difficult feedback.
Yeah, and it's good, you know.
Yeah,
I would always rather hurt somebody with the truth than make them feel good with a lie, because the lie is only going to create more of a mess later. So it's kind of like, it's how you, it's how you do give the truth, but you know, and it's going to sting. You know, you can kind of soften the blow a little bit, but still be truthful in it.
And I think like you can take a lot of the sting out of it, or a lot of the emotion out of it, you know, giving the feedback. But like, you know, I mentioned like Cartman's drama track. Like, if you just like get to the point where like, hey, I need you to make this change, let's talk about how we can do it. Like, if you give the feedback and give some support for the feedback as well, a lot of this gets removed, and we can step away from a lot of the drama and the tension around these kind of things.
A lot of it's timing. You know, if somebody's coming home exhausted, don't tell them when they walk through the door.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of filters on our life, you know, like sometimes it's exactly like that. Like we put on these like glasses, and you know, we talk about rose tinted glasses. There's certainly, I don't know what the opposite of rose tinted glasses are, but they exist. Like your kids are yelling, and you just came home from a long day at work, and now you got to get dinner on the table, and you're facing some financial stress. A lot of filters going over that scenario is probably not a great situation to have this really deep, heartfelt
conversation. Yeah. You know, just make sure that you have some you time. Make sure you have some you time, but make sure you have some you and them time too. You know, make sure that that's important, because that lets them know that they're important to you.
I'm trying to remember the author of the book, but you know, I remember them specifically. I think it's called Fighting for Your Marriage. I'm looking at, but they had a whole chapter on that. Like basically, yeah, there it is. It's Fighting for Your Marriage. It's Markman, Stanley, and Bloomberg, I think. Yeah, there it is. They had a whole chapter on that about creating boundaries around your marriage to protect it from outside forces. And so it was all about like, okay, when you're on a date, you know, make sure that you're not talking about the kids and you're not talking about all these problems. You like have a bubble around your relationship. And he was talking all about the importance of that, but basically echoing your comment there, like, yeah, it's very important to have time for yourself to recharge, and then this protected time for the relationship as well. I agree.
I mean, it lets them know that it's a priority, and it's not just what's left over time.
Yes.
You know, and that makes them feel, you know, important, and they should, because they're your other half. So for those who want to know more about High Thrive Coaching, which is what you and your partner do, how can they find you online?
So our website, there's going to be a couple ways. Our website is www.highthrivecoaching.com. And there's an apply button if you just want to have a chat with us and see if your relationship issues can be helped by someone on our team. But if you really just kind of want to get a flavor of what we talk about, you kind of want to get an idea of, you know, my philosophy and how I approach problems, You can check out our podcast. You can check out our Facebook group. The Facebook group is The Thriving Marriage, and we put our podcast on there. You can also look us up on YouTube.
And what's the podcast?
The Thriving Marriage Podcast.
Oh,
I had
okay.
to think about
That
that.
works.
Yeah, I had to think about it for a second because, like, we go back and forth, like High Thrive Coaching,
High Thrive,
Marriage. Yeah, I think it's the Thriving Marriage Podcast.
Very cool. Well, that's awesome. For those who are looking for any information, again, that's www.highthrivecoaching.com, HIGHTHRIVECOACHING.com. Okay, we have a few minutes left. Is there anything you would like to add?
I think, above all, in my experience, as in this position where a lot of couples are coming to me at that last moment, like like 5 minutes to midnight in terms of like,
the 11th hour, yeah.
That's the phrase I was looking for. I was like, there's a phrase for that.
The 11th hour, 11th or the Hail Mary, or whatever you want to call it.
You mentioned something along these lines earlier, but I can just see that if people would be a little bit more open to receiving help much earlier on in the process, a lot of these problems wouldn't exist, and I wouldn't have to be going through these emergency sort of procedures to turn a relationship around. So, what I just want to say is, if you're even thinking that, hey, you're not completely happy with your relationship, go and get some help now. Like, I'm absolutely happy with my wife right now, but there's always places where I can improve, and I'm getting help for that. And I think that's perfectly fine. And what I wish our culture embraced that sort of idea more, is just a regular pattern, or culture of improvement and getting help much earlier than before an emergency hits.
Yeah, I mean, if you get the help, and if you get healthier, even during, you guys can get healthy together, then that just benefits everybody that's around you. Yeah. It benefits you, your friends, your family, your whoever else is around you, and it makes you guys stronger. I know one of our things is we don't like surprises, we don't like secrets. And so the only secrets we're allowed to have from each other is like a present secret, or like something like that, like a surprise, like say a sibling wants to do a surprise party or something. That's the only secrets we have from each other. Otherwise, everybody knows we don't have secrets, because neither of us like surprises.
Yeah, it's great that you have very clear expectations around those sort of things. Like for my wife and I, we have a lot at stake. We have 5 kids together, and I want to make sure that we're giving them the best example that we can in terms of what a healthy relationship looks like, and make sure that they have a stable home life. And so, like, get help, people, much earlier than like before it becomes an emergency, and
before you become a statistic.
Yeah,
pretty much. So, well, thank you, Marc, for coming on today. Thank you for sharing your heart, and thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being transparent with us along the way. Appreciate you. And
my pleasure.
Thank you guys for listening to The Journey is Real. We talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. I'm CJ Peterson of cjpetersonwrites.com. Until next time.